I will get started with the webinar today. So thank you again all for joining. My name's Pauline Optebig. I'm the Climate Solutions Portfolio Lead at AII, which means that I oversee the Climate Solutions Portfolio from a grant-making perspective, but also the registry. So that is the full registry of solutions, and that's really what we're focusing on today. And just a bit of housekeeping. If you do have any questions, please put them into the chat and I will take them at the end of the presentation. This is being recorded and yeah, I hope to have some good engagement. So before we kind of go into what it means to be a registered solutions, I want to give a bit of a background first onto the kind of history of the Climate Solutions portfolio and how it links into the Fashion Climate Fund. So what we are aiming to do with the Climate Solutions portfolio is to help the industry answer three key questions. And by industry, I mean brands, facilities, but also the financial community. So what solutions really exist to reduce emissions? There's a lot of noise out there, so we're really kind of helping to find the solutions that will really help brands and suppliers hit their greenhouse gas reduction goals. But not all solutions are created equal. So we really want to focus on those that are credible, so those that really do deliver on greenhouse gas emission saving. And importantly, because they have the data to back that up. So meaning that the impact that they generate is actually verifiable. And again, within that, we want to further prioritize still and really make sure that between now and 2030, an ever kind of closing time window, we really focus our efforts on deploying and supporting the solutions that are going to make a very big impact and a big dent into that 2030 target. So really the solutions that are already mature and operating our commercial scale are those that are going to feature on the Climate Solutions portfolio. How this links into AII's Fashion Climate Fund. So we are currently in the process of raising a $250 million fund. We have 7 lead funders already, each contributing 10 million. And the purpose of that fund, which comes from a combination of brands and philanthropic bodies, is to catalyze the financial community to spend essentially a further 1.6 billion. And then the remaining part to get to that 2 billion is from supplier contribution. So what AII is trying to do is to use its grant money to really support catalytic funding of decarbonization in the sector, because ultimately reaching that 50% reduction by 2030 is going to require a lot of investment. And the sectoral goal is 50% reduction by 2030. And as AII, we are aiming to support by enabling the reduction of 100 million tons of carbon towards that goal. And of course, financing is a key part of that. But today we're really focusing on the Climate Solutions portfolio. So the decarbonization solutions that are going to get AII to that 100 million tons goal, but importantly, the sector to its 2030 goal. So first, I will start with a bit of a vision and strategy for what we want the Climate Solutions portfolio and the registered solutions to achieve. So essentially what we want to do is to deploy climate solutions so that the sector achieves its goal, and of course, so that AII can kind of demonstrate its success through our 100 million ton goal as well. And the way that we do that is looking at 3 different parts, namely supplier engagement. Of course, we need the engagement of suppliers in order to deploy the solutions, given that the overwhelming majority of that 50% reduction by 2030 is going to come from supplier decarbonization. And importantly, this has to be done at scale. So we have a team that looks at finding the highest emitters. We focus geographically and to connect with those suppliers, to connect those suppliers with the brands who buy from them, and to help build that business case for rapid decarbonization. Then, of course, comes the solutions. So this is what we're going to focus on today, is how we at AII are identifying the programs or technologies that we want to support the deployment of. And the third component that AI also looks at is where those technologies might have a high investment need, helping suppliers to get access to sustainable finance so that they can more easily make those investments. And the way we do that, or the reason why we are able to do that, is because AII is in quite a kind of unique position within the sector to really cross-connect and convene different stakeholders. We have really strong brand relationships. Indeed, some of them are our lead funders like H&M, Lululemon, and PVH, as well as the other brands that we work with. We have a very strong connection with suppliers through the work that we've already done with hundreds of suppliers, helping them set action plans, but also through our collaboration with organizations like Cascale and being able to leverage the Hague FEM to really get the data of who those top emitters are, and then to engage with them. And that really goes to our kind of supplier-centric approach, where historically we might have been directed by the brands, but what we want to do now is to take more of a supplier-centric approach to approach them, understand what their needs are for assistance, and then building the kind of bridge to the brands and potentially multiple brands at once to support one supplier on whatever their action plan is needing to be done. And of course, this has a regional focus as well. So there are key regions that we currently work in: China, Bangladesh, India, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Italy, and really focusing on the countries where we have a geographical footprint as well. So we have a regional lead based in India who deals with the India, Bangladesh, Pakistan region, and a very large team actually based in China as well. So that's where the majority of our work takes place. I've spoken to the funding. So again, in the same way that today we were talking about the climate solutions portfolio, we're also developing a sustainable finance solutions portfolio. So for facilities who need to make capital expenditures, they can kind of seek out the solutions in the countries that they operate in that might help them to do that. But we are also working with brands to make more engagement with the suppliers so that the business case for that implementation is stronger and not just dependent on low interest rates, for example, but looking at other financing mechanisms that can make that investment easier. And yeah, we really focus on carbon. That is the kind of key indicator that we measure for our impact. Our goal is to enable the reduction of 100 million tons of CO2 through a really data-driven approach. So everything we do from a solutions perspective is auditing when we get to solutions, what their CO2 potential impact is on an average basis on the facilities that they work with, and tracking that implementation as well. And yeah, it's a really kind of on the ground way of working. That's why we have local teams, local experts who go on site to the facilities that we work with to do the detailed action plans and to be able to connect the solutions on the climate solutions portfolio to the facilities that are most suitable for them. So what we've kind of done so far. So earlier today, we had a webinar with some demos from the registered climate solutions that we have already. The registry was launched in 2023, but originally kind of focusing more on the grant side of things, so the less mature solutions, but our engagement with mature solutions that are ready to deploy is really kicking up this year, and we're very excited to have registered and onboarded 8 solutions. And they're a very diverse portfolio. So they are diverse in where they originate from, geographically, where they implement, but also where in the supply chain they impact. So one of them focuses on denim exclusively, the other is really focusing on the knitting stage, and the others on printing, and some are facility-wide as well. So really making sure that we're not kind of focusing in on just one aspect of the supply chain, but helping the suppliers that we work with across all elements of their production, and of course being locally relevant as well. This was more of a targeted approach where we kind of went out to some solutions that we were already in conversations with, but since June the application has opened for any kind of mature solutions who want to apply. I will talk more about that application process later, but important to note is that it is an always-on application, and the advisory council that reviews it meets once a month to make those decisions. But more on that later. What we've learned throughout this process is that it is actually quite difficult to kind of get solution level data that is based on implementation, so real data, so that we can actually assess the reduction potential of solutions, and not only to kind of hear from facilities the CO2 impact data or energy reduction that has taken place, but also what is it like to work with the solution? Is it easy to implement? Does it require a lot of training? Does it still maintain the product quality, especially if it's something more innovative? So that's something that we've really learned through this initial application process, and providing more structure around that to make sure that we get the kind of quality information we need in order to progress the solutions who we are evaluating. And the other component that we're learning is that a lot of the typical kind of energy efficiency audit programs that take place at facility level, whether it's AII's Clean by Design or those done by other organizations, is that they tend to focus on kind of energy use across the board. They are not necessarily yet making recommendations that are process or machinery specific. And that's because most of the sector today is focusing on low-hanging fruits, those very kind of quick wins that maybe don't need any investment at all. But we, although we still see an increase in that type of work that AII does itself, we see that the sector really needs to move beyond low-hanging fruits and look at process level innovation and moving things to a new way of working to really achieve and make the bigger dent in that 50% by 2030 target. So that's something that we are looking at, is how do we kind of improve or update our energy efficiency audit work so that the action plans are not just looking at kind of general best practice, but taking those more mature facilities forward to the next step of, okay, how do I actually modify the process that are taking place in my factory so that I can drive emissions reductions even further? So what we're focusing on now, of course, the application is live, so we're actively recruiting more registered solutions, which is the purpose of the webinar today, and running that application as a steady state, and now kind of formalizing the connection within AII between supplier engagement and decarbonization solutions. So what's really important in the applications, for example, is to know specifically where in the supply chain, on which types of processes do these climate solutions work, so that we can train our experts who go on site to make that matchmaking happen, so that we can increase the deployment of our registered solutions directly into the supply chain. So that's a bit about kind of the vision of what we are aiming to achieve. I guess the headline is we want quality solutions that we can help to deploy through our programs. But what is it then that we are really looking for? So we have kind of, yeah, obviously the sector is broadly categorized within 4 tiers, and the work that AII has done previously on our WRI net zero roadmap kind of splits out where the emissions come from across those tiers. The majority coming from tier 2, that is where AII has historically focused the majority of its work. Most of the Clean by Design projects are done at wet processing facilities because that's where most of the emissions lie. So I would say the kind of key focus areas of these 6 levers are the types of solutions that we can easily deploy in our work with tier 2 facilities or with vertically integrated facilities. But the key component is the tier 2 factor. So those are the solutions that reduce process demand for energy, reduce energy losses, and of course, anything that actually looks at reducing or eliminating greenhouse gases from generating energy. So renewable electricity or low carbon thermal projects. We are also interested in receiving applications that from solutions that minimize waste, because again, anything that minimizes waste on the facility floor is definitely something that we can recommend to the facilities we work with. A little bit more tricky for us is the kind of tier 4, because that tends to be either at the brand level or at the raw material stage, where AII currently doesn't have any programs, but is exploring. Similarly, circularity is something that tends to happen at the brand stage or kind of outside the facility process. So those solutions are welcome to apply because they are important, and we want to give the space to open up a full marketplace for all kind of viable and ready to deploy climate solutions. Just note that the ones we are able to really support the deployment of are going to be more linked to that tier 2, because that's where all of our facility engagement happens, and ultimately the deployment and implementation that we can support. So just kind of this slide goes into a bit more detail, some of the kind of technology solutions examples of the types of things that we are looking to recruit. I won't go into this in much detail, but it just, yeah, give some examples of the types of actions, I guess, that we can link to certain technology. So that's important to note, that the way we deploy the solutions is linked to the action plans and audits that we do at the facility level. So where there is a recommendation to improve, for example, heat recovery from hot water, we can then go into our climate solutions portfolio and look at all of the solutions we have that support heat recovery from hot water, and then we can recommend that technology to the facility as an example. So there's a lot of behind the scenes sort of matching exercises that work between the recommendations that we make at the facility level and the types of solutions that we have on the climate solutions portfolio, and of course the ones we are actively recruiting now. So again, those that match more closely to the advice we give through Clean by Design are the ones that we are prioritizing to approach, apply, and register so that we can support their deployment. Beyond the kind of thematic applicability, there are a few more characteristics that we look for in a solution that is applicable to be registered on the climate solutions portfolio. So importantly, it should be a mature solution. This is not kind of to do with our grant funding. It's really registered solutions are those that we consider mature, who are already operating at a commercial scale and have a clear track record of satisfied customers. So we can see that they are actively working in the supply chain. Their solution is tried and tested, and it's delivering the outputs both from a greenhouse gas emissions perspective, but also from a product quality and performance perspective. So really the solutions that have already proven themselves. But of course, everyone wants to kind of sell more of their technology and deploy more. And that's what we're really helping to support, is the solutions who already are deploying at scale, but who would like maybe some more deployment to take place, that we can support, because in any case, accelerated action is needed across the sector, and we need lots of mature solutions to support that. In order to kind of check those things, of course, we need verifiable performance data to really demonstrate the effectiveness of a solution. So it is a core component of the application process to have machine level data where you can show what the impact of your technology or your program or your service is against the baseline. This should be based on studies that you have conducted, and we would like to see the kind of reduction potential against the baselines you have worked with in facilities and the reductions you then achieve. But we also want this to be compared against our baselines so that we can standardize the assessment and look at the average kind of emissions per sub-process of the supply chain. So that's what we're kind of looking for, and then solutions that can benefit from business development opportunities with AII, whether that's through the manufacturers we work with, through brands, and of course, I imagine that some technologies do experience a bit of a pause between the facility is interested and the facility is ready to make the financial investment. So because we have this access to sustainable financing through our Fashion Climate Fund, we also help to not only speed up the matchmaking between facilities and solutions, but also the implementation, because we are able to provide access to that financing. So solutions should, but this is not grant funding. This is just the capital expenditure that a facility might need to employ the solution. The solutions applying to be on the registry should have a very demonstrable business case. Of course, payback periods will vary based on the investment, but we do expect that the solutions who are applying do not need subsidies to be kind of a good business case idea. It has to kind of sell itself. And again, as I mentioned in a previous slide, we're really focusing on solutions that can be integrated into AII existing programs. So namely those that focus on tier 2 facilities or vertically integrated organizations, so that we are actually able to help the deployment of that solution through our existing network, through the existing work that we do. So just to kind of sum it up, we're on the hunt for solutions, and that could be a technology or a program that has data, broad sectoral reach. So very kind of broad solutions, not necessarily the super niche applications, but those that can be applied across lots of different contexts. Solutions that demonstrate significant reductions, and those that are really kind of already on a scaled basis, so that they can make a big dent into that 2030 goal. So the benefits essentially of being a registered solution is, on the one hand, you're part of AII's strategy. We are a very committed and ambitious organization. We want to enable the reduction of 100 million tons of CO2 by 2030, which is a very large number. And the only way we can do that to go beyond what we already do with our Clean by Design program is to move beyond low-hanging fruits. And for that, we need credible climate solutions, and we are incredibly committed to supporting their deployment. So because we have an ambitious strategy and solutions are the key component to that strategy, that's a benefit in and of itself, because that's really what we are aiming to do, is to increase your business so that we can increase the deployment and reduction of CO2. So broken down into other components, the first step is, of course, the independent validation. So going through the vetting and review process through our application, where the data is audited, the solution itself is kind of reviewed in terms of product quality, ease of implementation, and that's done through our advisory council, which is made up of brand, manufacturer, and technical experts. And then once that application is successful, using our standardized data communication approach, these accurate numbers can then be communicated in a standardized manner, which is done on our CSP platform. So all of the registered solutions are featured on this platform, which is essentially a kind of spotlight of solutions that we've vetted. And once they are vetted, we do a lot of social media to communicate that they have been registered. Once they have been implemented, of course, we want to do case studies, and every kind of cohort, so essentially every quarter, we do kind of a demo day so that the solutions can present themselves to our network. And the platform is not there just to showcase the projected impact, but also the actual impact, because with our very ambitious goal of 100 million tons reduced by 2030, of course, we have to track that. So we want to work with solution providers and the facilities and the brands to make sure that everyone is able to track the reductions that take place, and supporting the kind of data collection and validation of that impact. And inevitably, all of this should lead to grown business. So because we have access to the kind of most emitting suppliers, highest emitting suppliers within the supply chain, very strong relationships with global leading brands, and the investor community, we're very well placed to support the increased deployment of solutions. And again, those that kind of fit more closely to the work we do at a facility level can be incorporated into the recommendations that we make when we go on site and when we develop action plans to then be able to match make the solutions to the facilities directly on the basis that they can reduce emissions. And where a kind of an investment is needed on the facility side, then we can accelerate that as well through our sustainable finance work. So how do we actually then evaluate the solutions? We have kind of, the process itself is done through a solution overview report. So this is really to standardize the applications. There's a report template which you can find on our application hub. And broadly speaking, it helps to kind of answer the questions of how does your solution deliver emissions reduction? Where in the supply chain is it most suitable? What is the current scale of the solution, and how can it meaningfully contribute to 2030 industry goals? And all of this is evaluated against our model process baselines. So we have a tool which at the sub-process level, we're not just looking at an average, well, we are looking at averages, but we're not evaluating solutions at a facility level. We are evaluating them at the specific sub-process within a facility compared to the model process. Of course, if you replace a process or you reduce the time of a process, that is then the kind of calculations that we want to see. But all of these submissions have to be done against our baselines to make sure that we can compare apples to apples, and that everyone is kind of reporting reduction potential against model processes and not using very bad baselines, for example. So it is a very data-focused application. This is then submitted through our application partner software submittable, and it's evaluated by the Climate Solutions Portfolio Advisory Council once a month. So they meet on a monthly basis, they review the applications, discuss, and then approve, and then kind of the onboarding process begins. More details on the kind of application guidance and all of that can be found on our application hub. I won't be going into detail on that today. But I can answer some questions once I get to the end of the presentation. So there are three main criteria that I alluded to in the previous slide. The first one is effectiveness. So how much does a solution quantifiably reduce greenhouse gas emissions? And that's where we evaluate that average reduction potential against our baselines. And using this tool, this methodology of assessment, we can then kind of assess, how is this solution going to contribute in the longer term? And also how can AII support that solution in contributing to the sector's reduction goals? Then we have reach. So how much of the industry can actually be impacted by the solution? So specifically, which processes or sub-processes does this impact? Again, we are looking for solutions that are not super niche in their application. So for example, a solution that only focuses on silk is not going to be such a high priority for us because that's not a high volume material, whereas solutions that kind of improve dyeing on synthetics or on all fibers, these types of solutions, of course, have a very broad sectoral reach. And that's really what we're focusing on. And that's also how the application is structured, so that we're really evaluating solution only on the component of a factory process that it impacts. And finally, looking at scale, where is the technology currently being deployed in? How many facilities? Does it have brand relationships? What are any existing barriers to scale? Does it require investment? Does it require a lot of floor space? These are the types of questions that we like to have answered in our application process. And of course, through evaluating the application, we then want to be able to see how can AII support the scale of that solution so that it can contribute to those sectoral goals. How can we, do the matchmaking with facilities and or brands to help further deployment of that solution? So yeah, that was kind of a very brief overview of the registry, what we're aiming to do, and what the application process looks like. As I said, more detailed information is available on the application hub, but I do see there is a question which asks if the independent validation of the solutions is tied to the Ready Reckoner tool. So yes, this is the tool that I have been mentioning. It's called the Ready Reckoner Solutions Impact Evaluator, and that's where the model processes come from. So the kind of first part of the data assessment that we're looking at is how does your reduction potential compare against the model processes? And then also by being able to kind of say what the reduction potential is and where the solution is impacted, we can then calculate with this tool to 2030 what could be the impact of your solution at the scale that you've kind of projected you will achieve by 2030. So that's the tool that we use to evaluate. It's based on a lot of industry data and consultation with experts. It's by no means perfect, but it's really the kind of best tool we have found to compare averages across the sector, to evaluate solutions, and to communicate average impact potential. And we do that on a per kilograms of production basis as we are, as an organization, moving to carbon intensity to kind of really be able to demonstrate the impact that machines can have, or technologies, programs, any solution on the relative emissions intensity of a facility. I don't see any other questions that have come through. I did. So is there an economic evaluation of dollar per ton CO2 needed for the validation? So yes, that is a component of the assessment. Ultimately, we hope for kind of somewhere around the industry average, which currently sits at $67 per ton of CO2. So for those of you perhaps not so familiar, this metric basically evaluates for the investment that a facility makes on a piece of machinery, for example, compared to the CO2 impact it's going to deliver over the lifetime of that machinery's use. What is then the kind of spend per ton of CO2 reduction that facility can achieve? So that's a really key metric for us because, yeah, that really demonstrates the kind of scalability of some solutions and also what the kind of return on investment from a carbon perspective will be for the facility. There are many solutions that of course have higher than the industry average, and that might be because the reduction is seen kind of elsewhere in the supply chain, or it is a slightly newer solution. So we are very open to kind of different levels of that figure, but the $67 is kind of the industry average for something that has a reasonable payback. But we also see that, you know, once the low-hanging fruits are covered, of course, those payback periods and the ratio of dollars per tons tends to increase as more innovative technologies are implemented. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, I don't see any other questions that are coming through, but if you do have questions on our application, what it means to be a registrant, please do get in touch. The best email to kind of connect with is csphelp@apparelimpact.org, so that we know the request is specifically to the climate solutions portfolio, and there we can answer any questions you have on how the application works, how the Ready Reckoner tool works, perhaps, although there is a demo video in the application hub for that. And if you want to hear more about what the benefits are, we would be very happy to share that with you. So I think with that, as no further questions have come through, I will end the webinar for today. Thank you so much for joining. And again, the email is very much open to hear more from you, and we're really looking forward to having more solutions apply so that we can increase deployment within the sector. Thank you very much. Have a good day.